Aaron.
Uncle Aaron reads the funnies. Yeah, Uncle Aaron's story time.
Here, I'm going to give you guys something I got down at, that's one of the exhibitors from National League.
Oh, I'll check it out. Okay, we almost there. We still waiting for Blanchard. Oh, everybody got one?
Yeah, I share.
Okay.
This is something to help citizens.
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah, leaking water. Oh,
Looking for leaking water, yeah.
Look for
yeah.
leaks.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
So who's passing out blue pills?
The blue pill.
Randall Hardy.
I just saw it.
Yeah.
I saw this advertisement.
Yeah.
Thought I would. No.
Yeah, for anybody at home who thinks we're passing secret notes. All right, well, it's 4 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call our January 5th, 2015 meeting, our first meeting of the year, special meeting.
It's not a special.
Just because. With a roll call, please.
Mayor Householder.
Here.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Davis and Commissioner Hardy.
Here.
At this moment, all who are able, if you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have no awards and proclamations today, so I'll open up the floor to the Citizens Forum. That's an opportunity for anyone who has anything that's not on today's agenda that they'd like to bring before the commission. They can do so now. We simply ask that you give your name and address and limit any comments to 5 minutes, preferably. Okay, seeing none. We have nothing on the public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time. That'll take us to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of December 29, 2014. Item 6.2, award contracts for the right-of-way concrete sidewalk repairs, project number 14-3060 to Lancaster Construction in the amount of $21,254.29, and Davis Construction in the amount of $7,287.50 with a 5% construction contingencies for each.
Is there any item on the consent agenda Commissioner would like removed or amended? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Mayor, I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the consent agenda as presented. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 4-0. That will take us on to administration.
Item 7.1, excuse me, oral report from legal counsel and possible action by governing body regarding proposed initiative and referendum petition relating to resolution number 14-7152 as it amended section 2 of resolution number 13-6988.
See, I guess I didn't see my, is there nothing here? Is it just going to be from legal counsel here on this? Okay.
Yes, there was no blue sheet
Okay.
Associated with the item, and appreciate that. And Mayor and Commissioners, with the work that we have done, it would be very helpful if I could address certain aspects of the matter with you in executive session before presenting my report on that matter. I would appreciate, starting with 15 minutes, hopefully 15 minutes will address the matter, and I realize we don't like to take those sorts of breaks during the meeting, and we'll certainly keep it as quick as we can, but that would be very helpful.
Okay, sounds good.
Attorney-client privilege?
Yes, yes.
I move to recess into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at 4:20.
Second.
Motion is second to move into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss, well, the items mentioned. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 4-0. We're in executive session. So,
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, I'll go ahead through my report and my recommendation.
Okay.
And appreciate everyone's indulgence in my opportunity to visit with you a little bit. I can now speak, as you know, at the special meeting that you had in your last meeting in December. Mr. Ray Ruska, who's here, as maybe you noticed, and I certainly invite him to comment, whether either if I misspeak or after I speak, but Mr. Ruska indicated that he anticipated going forward with pursuit of signatures on an initiative and referendum petition that seeks to rescind resolution number 14-7152 that amended section 2 of resolution 136988, which was your original action authorizing and approving the issuance of bonds in relation to the improvements that are underway for the Bicentennial Center. As you know, we have seen the role of the initiative and referendum statute in various circumstances. The response to the smoking ordinance was the effort to repeal the smoking ordinance was initiated through that process. The issue with regard to the LGBT amendment was initiated through that process, and even more recently, the referendum that addressed the fluoridation question was initiated through that same process. So it does play an important role in the democratic process. It's recognized in that way, and it is something that we certainly respect and regard as an important part of the state statutory scheme as to the determination of policy at the local government level. There's key language in that statute, however, that makes the distinction. It makes expressly clear that the legislation does not apply to administrative matters. And frankly, I think we have in this case the classic distinction between those two types of matters. As I mentioned, those that we have experienced previously, those were all, well, at least certainly in the case of the smoking ordinance and the LGBT ordinance, clearly on their face legislative matters where law had been made, new law had been made, and the initiated effort was to repeal those. As you might recall, we did have to look to, in the case of the fluoridation question, there is a fairly recent Kansas Supreme Court case that lays out the test for whether a matter is administrative or whether it is legislative. And in applying those tests, we did look at that and felt that it was correct to categorize the fluoridation question as a legislative matter. In the case of the proposed petition, I'll simply say that, in my opinion, it is an administrative matter and is not subject to the initiative and referendum process. That opinion simply translates at this point in time into that, and I've provided Mr. Ruska with that opinion, but that doesn't necessarily control what anyone does. I don't mean to suggest that it would or should. In looking back at this situation and where I think the distinction comes to light, this matter of the resolution that the proposed petition seeks to rescind was one in a series of 22 different, separate, distinct actions that you all have taken in relation to the Bicentennial Center project since December of 2012, when the 2013 business plan for the Bicentennial Center was adopted. That same date, you had approved a detailed capital improvement plan for the Bicentennial Center. And then on March 4th, 2013, was when you approved that resolution I mentioned, 136988, which authorized and provided for the issuance of bonds under the authority of what is KSA 12-1736 and the statutes that follow that. I won't go through date by date, but there were approximately 16 or so intervening actions that you'll recall where there were specific contracts let for specific purposes that were most dealt with from a scheduling standpoint and trying to minimize interference with scheduling of events and trying to also take care of those things that were imminently urgent, such as sound and lighting and some of those things that you addressed earlier in the process. All the while, and as I'm sure you'll recall, this project, the larger scope of the project, was being handled through a construction manager at risk process, determined to be the best way to most efficiently and effectively and financially address the project. So that process took place and brought us from early in 2013 all the way up to late in 2014 when this action that we speak of, Resolution 14-7150, was brought before you. I'm sorry, 147150 was when, you might recall, on November 10th, after all the work that went into determining what would be the best guaranteed maximum price amendment under that construction manager at risk process, was brought before you. And I think you all are particularly aware of all the work that went into developing that. The reason I make that point, all of this process has to do with the unique nature of managing to a facility and improvements to a facility such as the Bicentennial Center. That guaranteed maximum price amendment was approved. It was followed on November 17 with Resolution 147152 that brought the amended that March 4th, 2013 action up to coincide with the results of the process through the construction manager at risk process arriving at that guaranteed maximum price amendment. In other words, there was a logical sequence there manifesting the results of all of that work. That also, well, as you know, upon the approval of that guaranteed maximum price amendment, the city was then under contract for the completion of that work based upon that guaranteed maximum price. And as you know, the project is underway. Point being, I won't argue every aspect of the full test, but in applying the test that the Kansas Supreme Court has given us, this would seem to be the classic administrative act in carrying out what is your responsibility in relation to the management of a facility such as the Bicentennial Center. Following these actions, you may recall that we did have an initial undertaking of a petition that by Mr. John Price in his role as a citizen of Salina that sought also to rescind that same Resolution 14-7152. That petition was ultimately withdrawn. Subsequent to that, Mr. Hruska presented his petition to the county councilor for review, as is the statutory process, also seeking rescission of that same resolution and the submission of that resolution to a referendum vote. In the course of providing Mr. Montoya's advisory opinion letter articulating the result of his review of the form of the petition, it may be of interest to you that Mr. Montoya also opined that he felt that the matter was administrative in nature, and that now, again, that doesn't mean that it's not his role as a gatekeeper, but he simply provided that conclusion in his letter to Mr. Hruska. It would seem to me that what is most important for both the City Commission, Mr. Hruska, and any who might be in support of the petition, to get as quickly as we can to a judicial resolution of the question of whether the petition puts forth an administrative or a legislative matter. As I mentioned, my opinion, Mr. Montoya's opinion, hopefully serve some useful purpose, but they don't direct or ultimately address the legal status of the matter as a court determination would. That can be pursued through a petition filed in the Salina County District Court seeking the court's determination of that question. Now, we will have to actually file a suit, and we don't take that lightly, particularly when it involves a citizen. Mr. Hruska and I have spoken of this in anticipation of the need for doing so. Again, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he understands, based on my explanation, why it is that we have to show the court there is an actual controversy, and that in order to do so, a party has to be named, and for us to do so, it would be necessary to name Mr. Hruska as the person directing the work on the petition. And again, I keep looking to him. I don't want to speak for him, and I'll certainly invite him to correct me, but I think we've talked about that, and he understands why, for us to advance the matter correctly, it will require doing so. It raises the question of whether there's any effort to affect what anyone is doing in the meantime, and through any sort of seeking any sort of injunctive relief, where the court would direct either temporarily or otherwise a particular action to be taken or not be taken by particular parties. And after my recommendation and in consultation with bond counsel, it would not seem necessary to seek any injunctive relief. There would seem to be no point in attempting to thwart any effort to pursue signatures or anything else. As you can see, that it all takes us back to the key question: is it administrative or legislative? And I think anything we can do, it would seem to be in everyone's best interest to get that question resolved as quickly as possible before expecting a court to do anything one way or another before having an opportunity to make that determination. And there is provision in the statute for an expedited hearing on that type of question, and I would hope that we could pursue it that way to get the answer as quickly as possible. So with that, my recommendation would be that you authorize us to prepare and file the pleadings necessary to pursue determination by the Saline County District Court of that, of making or providing us with a declaratory judgment of whether the petition as proposed addresses an administrative or legislative matter. That will then tell us whether it is subject to the initiative and referendum statute or not. With that, I guess I'd ask if Mr. Gage has anything to add, or you have questions.
Well, I think for your benefit and the benefit of the public, I mean, when we look at this, it is very clear to us that it's administrative in nature, not subject to the initiative referendum process. As Greg mentioned, it's clear to Mr. Montoya, the county councilor, that it's also administrative in nature. Quite honestly, we find there's a little folly involved here, but the fact of the matter is that the district court is there for a reason, and it's there to give us determinations on such questions. So in order to get the answer that we think is the proper answer, we have to file. We have to spend the time and money to do that. Unfortunately, I would be the first to tell you it's a waste of time and money, but in order to, in essence, I believe, have a judge support the intent of the Kansas state law on this topic, that's what we need to do. So I'm very comfortable with the recommendation of legal counsel, as you might expect, and would hope that you would also be and authorize the filing so we can finish wasting our time and money and get this over with and move forward. And quite honestly, for the other benefit of the public, we're working on a building here that's over 30 years old that is much in need. I mean, we could let it fall apart like some folks do allow their buildings to fall apart, because there's, quite honestly, not everyone believes in proper maintenance and upkeep of their facilities for utilization or aesthetic purposes, or for the benefit of their neighborhoods. We do, and we believe that for the benefit of the community to utilize this building, that the project is very much necessary. It fits into our 5-year capital improvement plan. It's been through those conversations. You've weighed that, you've weighed the cost, you've weighed all aspects of it. So we're all comfortable with that, and that it will address the long-term viability of that building for the future and allow us to be competitive with regards to bringing activities and concerts and things to Salina that people have come to expect over the last 30 years. So this is necessary. We'll go through it with your authorization and hopefully get a quick decision and then get the project done, and I think folks will be very happy with it.
Do you anticipate, what kind of timeline would you anticipate if we were able to get this put together and filed this week?
Well, a precise date as far as when the court would be willing to hear the matter is certainly at the court's discretion. We, in our pleading, would outline what we believe to be the basis for the urgency. And again, I'll be talking with Mr. Hruska about ways in which we might jointly be able to participate in expediting that process. So I'm not very definitively answering your question, and I can assure you we would just be requesting that the court recognize the significance for all parties. And there shouldn't, I don't believe, and I don't anticipate any of the pleadings, particularly when we're dealing strictly with the declaratory judgment and not seeking any injunctive relief. I can't imagine that there will be any facts in dispute. I think the facts will all just be what they are, and would expect, we'll certainly couch it in terms that would enable the court to take it up as rapidly as possible.
And Commissioners, to that point, obviously our intention is to move it as fast as we can in the system, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to ask any citizen, any person that's able to sign a petition, to sign a document that may very well be determined to have no real value.
And just to kind of go over the numbers again for anybody that's kind of watching, you kind of mentioned about maintaining our buildings, and my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, the current cost of this, a building about like this is about 50-some million. Is that what they said, 50 to 65 million?
To replace.
To replace.
Yeah, and just recently there was an article about the cost estimate for renovation of the Hutch Community College field house, which is more of a pure field house type structure, and I believe that was 29 million. Either 29 or 39 million. It was much higher.
I was thinking when the architects and contractors and everybody mentioned what it costs to traditionally restore a building about 7,500, our size, 8,500 seat venue. I was thinking they said it was somewhere between 25 and 30 million or something like that. I thought was what they came up with. And we're not only, I mean, so for one, I mean, I'm not saying we're being thrifty. We're trying to be, of course, in everything that we do. But I'm trying to say that we're coming in about half of what most people are spending in remodeling, and we're not just remodeling, we're adding, I would say, improvements that probably should have been there from the beginning. And enhancing the building, not just giving it a new paint job. I mean, there's more to it than just that. So we're going above, maybe and beyond some of those other places for about half the money. And so I think that it's important that people at home realize that, and I agree 100%. We've talked about this in other meetings, that current buildings that we begin to look at least this commission has talked about, what's our forward plan? Because we don't want to put a commission 30 years down the road in the same position we found ourselves in, no disrespect to the previous commissions, but maybe had some things been taken along the way, we wouldn't be looking at 13 million. We might be looking at, 3 or 4 million for some enhancements or something versus a whole new roof or a whole new AC. But some of those things wear out when they wear out, and we can't necessarily pick the times. So, there's 30 years of maintenance being done here, not just an off-the-cuff kind of hey, let's go spend $13 million on something.
Absolutely, and quite honestly, if you wanted it to look like a brand new facility and function like a brand new facility, first of all, there are design changes because new facilities aren't designed the way this facility was, but you could easily spend $5 to $10 million more dollars. So when you say thrifty, there are aspects of the project that were first included in the brainstorming that initially everyone in the group said there's no way we're going to get to that. We need to really focus on utilization and safety, and there's some aesthetic in there as well, but most of it's utilization and safety, things like heating and air conditioning that people expect.
Handrails.
So handrails.
Commissioner Crawford.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, exactly. I mean, things that probably should be there and should have been there in the first place, but things change. Times change. At the time, that was the design.
And interestingly enough, I'll share a little fact that I think we've shared with you, but we haven't probably talked about that much lately, is that when we used to, as a city, when we used to operate the facility, we were upwards of pretty close to roughly $1 million in an operational loss of the facility. Now, you could look at it and say, wow, that's a big deal, we should close the facility. But quite honestly, we probably had between, it depends who you ask, but the facility created between a $10 and $15 million economic impact to our community.
Sure. Restaurants,
hotels, all that type of stuff. So it's one of those where you kind of look at it and you say, you're going to lose some dollars to benefit the community. That's just the way those types of functions are. But since that time, we obviously brought in Global Spectrum, and we said what we'd like to do is bring that cost that we supplement down lower and lower and lower and lower, and use that to help offset and hopefully pay for most of the cost of the enhancements. Well, we're down to about the $500,000 range, so almost half of that subsidy or general fund support, whatever you want to call that, has been trimmed off. And that was the goal of prior commissions when they first started to look at this project. And quite honestly, once we finish the improvements, we can use the facility for better ways. And we can have, for example, a lot of new events have heavier lights and things for the larger types of events that we can't get today. And so they'll be able to do a few more things with the facility. And so that $500,000 is liable to dip into the $400,000s. And I think when we say where's it going to bottom out, I think probably somewhere around $400,000, which means we're going to be, in essence, saving compared to when we operated upwards of about $500,000 to $600,000. And that's pretty much over a 20-year period. That's pretty close to the amount that you're spending to renovate the facility. So in essence, what you're doing is, it really fits the long-term plan for that building, and using savings through better operations to pay for the improvements, and not, in essence, add a lot of cost to the taxpayer. You're not looking at increasing taxes to the taxpayer for this.
Sure, sure. And we realize that this is real money. That 600,000 could go to roads or whatever else.
Sure.
But we have this facility, and we need to take care of it. And that's what it boils down to. And like I said, through having Global Spectrum here, bringing that money down, in a sense, it's a zero gain from a standpoint of a tax for the most part, but potential. You know, I would say, obviously, if we were doing between 10 and 15 million of estimated economic impact to the local restaurants and hotels and things, you got to think you go put 13 million into building, you're going to probably at least maintain that or do a little bit better, and we need to maintain that, because if it was gone tomorrow, that's 10 to 15 million potential dollars that wouldn't be here annually.
If you went and bulldozed that building today, you would have a lot of people tell you that was a really dumb thing to do because of the economic impact it does provide to our community and of the recreational impact it provides,
Sure.
and entertainment impact.
There are times when you hear 13 million, you think maybe you should bulldoze it.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but I
Never
think
as
we're really heading in the right
inexpensive as
direction. I
you'd
think
like.
Ron, who's in our audience out there today, and his crew are doing a great job. I think they're showing us what's possible, and it's run very well. Of course, I meet over there every Monday for a meeting, and not with
and it's a
Ron,
competitive
different
market.
private meeting, but
Right.
yeah.
Since this building has been constructed, there are competing buildings. Dodge City's a good example. That the north end of Wichita, they're competing facilities. So we have to be in a position to compete for those events and activities. Otherwise, it doesn't do us a lot of good to have Global Spectrum because we handcuff them. So
Right.
we need to give them the full ability to utilize that building and bring those events to us. They're doing a great job now. I know they can even do a better job in the future, and we'll be glad that we did that.
Great. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was just going to ask, as a general rule then, does resolution equal administrative and ordinance equal legislative?
That is a good guideline. I would put it this way: when you're legislating, you'll want to be doing that by ordinance. Now, as I mentioned that to Mr. Montoya, and he said, well, you can put anything in a resolution that you would put in an ordinance if you just, depending on what you call it. So I don't want to make categorical judgments in that regard, but generally speaking, that is a fair statement. Where you're legislating, you'll be by ordinance, and administratively, where you're dealing with specific matters in relation to specific circumstances, it will generally be by resolution.
So we're not spending millions of dollars in an ordinance, generally, or ever.
Well, when you're legislating, that would generally be the case.
So I was just wondering, because this is a resolution.
That's certainly indicative of the correct characterization of it.
That was our intent.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, in fact, yes, and the initiative and referendum statute speaks specifically only of ordinances. So I think it was supportive of that distinction. And
Anyone else?
and
If not,
frankly,
maybe- sorry.
the petition speaks of an ordinance to rescind the resolution, because that's the only way it even on its face qualifies for the initiative and referendum statute, because the initiative and referendum statute deals only with ordinances.
Can you see the irony there?
Yeah. It's getting too legal for me.
Well-
yeah.
If it would be helpful, if you wish to go forward with the recommendation, it might be noteworthy in case you all were reflecting back. When you considered resolution number 147152, there was no public comment. The motion, if you were so inclined, I think would simply authorize us to file a petition in the Saline County District Court. It will need to name Mr. Ray Haruska for the reasons I described, seeking a determination of whether the petition that he has indicated that he is circulating is either administrative or legislative, as that would determine whether it's subject to initiative and referendum or not.
So the point of the petition is to ask the commission to draft an ordinance to repeal our resolution.
The petition that
Yeah.
Mr. Haruska has put forward, it does, and that gets us into another topic, but it does actually two things. The petition as presented asks you to rescind your prior vote and submit the question to referendum. The statute actually anticipates that you be presented with the ordinance to either adopt, enact, or not, and if not, then place it or schedule it for an election. So the question in the petition is different in that, in the Mr. Haruska's petition is different in that regard.
Okay, if nobody has anything else, maybe we'll hear from Mr. Haruska if he wants, and he has anything for us. Maybe that's just since he's here. I mean, probably a good idea. Who wants to add anything? Sure, sure.
I'm in the habit of saying my name first, so I won't do that.
We know who you are.
Ray Haruska, 235 North Santa Fe.
Great, thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Bankston, for your presentation. This petition is about freedom. The U.S. Constitution, First Amendment, grants us the right to redress grievances at local, state, and federal levels. It's called the right to petition. The city is challenging the validity of a petition, whether it's legislative or administrative. The only way this question can be answered is if you take it on to the next step, which would be legal means. It's kind of like they're jumping in front of the fact before it occurs. There has been no damage whatsoever to the city of Salina regarding this petition. So, no actual injury. There seems to be points that about Mr. Bankston and Michael Montoya come to the same conclusion. Well, I would submit that everyone has an opinion, including lawyers. I wasn't even going to bring this up, but the Mr. Gage brought it up about the structural issue of the roof. There are some issues with that roof that, from what I've learned, are unfixable. What engineer is going to sign off on it and say it's strong enough to hold this extra rigging? We're talking about a public safety issue. If this roof falls because of an error, the public is going to be the ones that are going to pay the price. And I believe that the city does not have standing to bring this petition issue to a legal setting because actual harm cannot be claimed. That's called standing. And I think Mr. Bankston is aware of that, as Mr. Gage is also. If you dissect every one of the details about declaratory judgment and actual controversy, you'll find that there's some wide open areas that need to be addressed, which is whether it's legislative or administrative. And perhaps, and I don't know this for a fact, I'm making a comment here, could there be a possibility of a quasi-legislative action here, or a quasi-judicial? Now, I don't know if that fits this or not, but in the past, there's been issues surrounding those types of things that have come up. And I personally believe that under the, and this is coming from Black's Law Book, under prematurity, and it states that the circumstances existing, or the circumstance existing when the facts underlying a plaintiff's complaint, and the city would be the complainant, do not create a live complaint. How do you have a live complaint or have something litigated when there's no damage that has been caused by the petition? And the affirmative defense is based on this, or my affirmative defense would be based on this circumstance.
Well, maybe, I don't want to cut you off, but it sounds like you're kind of trying to try the case, whether your opinion is what your legal idea is, and I think that would be for the courtroom.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Householder. Yeah. What did Greg Bankston just do? He was telling us about administrative.
He's advising us as to what we need to do about from a legal standpoint.
And he also indicated that
you're trying to try the case here in front of us. You're trying to try the case.
Said it was okay.
That's
now,
fine.
Is that trying the
there
case?
Are legal counsel to advise us. If you, I think we're more interested in what your purpose of this is. We don't want to hear the case in front of us here. I mean, you're entitled to speak about what you want, I suppose, but I would think you'd want to use the time to kind of tell us maybe a little bit more about what the idea is or what your intent of this.
I've already explained that, and I think you already understand that.
Okay, well then let me address at least a couple of things that you said real quick, and I appreciate your concern for the public safety, but you tell us on one hand that you're concerned about public. Well, let's start from the beginning. You're telling us that you think our decisions need to be out for referendums all the time. Now, how slow do you think the government would be? How efficient do you think the people in Salina expect us to be up here? Our meetings already last 4 or 5 hours long as we go into details. Do you think if every decision we put out went out to a public vote, how efficient do you think the city would be? How much stuff do you think would get done? That's the first thing. The second thing is, you tell me you're concerned about public safety, and I appreciate that. But then you tell us don't spend any money on the Bicentennial Center. One of the things we're doing in this...
I didn't say that. I said it's unfixable.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we're doing is removing the hanging of the lights and things from that structure, from that roof, and actually putting in a lower structure. I would find it a little bit appalling that you're willing to take something to try and put it out and have public sign it, that you're concerned about how we're spending money when you don't even know what we're doing with the building. That seems a little bit shocking to me, that you haven't even looked at what the plans are and what we're spending the money on. You just don't want to spend the money. I mean, you're entitled to do it, Mr. Hruska, don't get me wrong, but it just seems a little odd that you would go out and ask citizens to sign into something when you don't even know what the plan is for it. And that seems a little, I mean, come on. I mean, I appreciate that you want to save taxpayers' money.
Well, Mr. Householder, thank you for your opinion, because it's yours.
Well, it is mine.
I have no response to that.
Oh, I mean, I'm just saying, if you're going to sit up here and try and tell us you're concerned about public safety.
Are you going to allow me for the floor, or are you going to continue talking?
I would say no.
If you could make this, wrap it up pretty quickly.
I've wrapped it up already. Your householder here
then we're done.
If I may.
Yeah.
Mayor and Commissioners and Mr. Hruska, if you don't mind, I do have a question, as you might imagine. As I've reported to the Commission, Mr. Hruska has certainly been cooperative. We've been communicating quite a lot. I probably sent him more information than he cared to see as far as, but I know Mr. Hruska. I've worked with Mr. Hruska. As I told him in my letter, I'm sure he put some stock, possibly in my opinion, some stock in Mr. Montoya's opinion, but Mr. Hruska is kind of a
Check it out
dive
for
in and check
yourself
it out
kinda guy.
yeah, is that what, yeah, that's what I said in the letter. And I meant that.
Well,
And
nothing wrong with that.
that's what prompted me to provide the level of information that I did. I knew that Mr. Hruska was certainly more than capable of looking at it and going through it and seeing what was the basis for at least my analysis and seeing what he thought. We also were communicating in terms of Mr. Hruska's intent. I didn't want to get ahead of the situation, depending upon what Mr. Hruska felt and what his plans were, and that's what prompted this discussion not occurring until after Mr. Hruska had an opportunity last week to indicate that he was going forward. Now, I'll be the first to say that my basis for believing that we did have an issue that was in both of our best interests to determine as rapidly as possible was when you indicated you were planning on going forward with the pursuit of signatures, and that was the basis of my suggesting that this was the right timing, because frankly it would seem in both of our best interests to get as early as possible the court's determination of the status of the matter. And I guess I would just ask if I'm correct in my understanding that you are currently pursuing signatures and that you anticipate continuing the pursuit of signatures at this time.
So answering that question determines whether or not you will file for a declaratory judgment. Is that true?
Well, if you tell me that you're not pursuing signatures, and if that's, we both, if we're upstairs, we want to be representing the facts to the court accurately. And as I said, I don't want to allege any facts that are not correct, and I know you don't want to put forward any facts that are not correct. But one of the key facts was my understanding that you were pursuing signatures and that you intended to go forward pursuing signatures. If that's not the case, I want to be sure that the commissioners are dealing with the facts as I relate.
Let me cut to the chase. Let me cut to the chase. This isn't Ray, waste the city commission and taxpayers' money and time. Are you pursuing this or are you not? If you're pursuing it, then I would guess our motion will be to move forward with this, because at that point I think the harm is done. You know that. We're not being cagey here. Are you doing this or not? Yeah, don't answer that.
I might add, if
I mean,
I'll give Mr. Hruska a minute to
I mean,
process
that's the thing.
that,
I mean, this is taxpayers' time and money. It's our time and money. And Ray, I appreciate your ability to petition and your First Amendment rights. But at some point, you're no longer pursuing the First Amendment rights when you're being cagey like this. You're wasting our time. So which is it?
So who is being cagey?
I'm asking you a simple question, just like the attorney is. Or do you plan? Are you getting signatures?
Are you being cagey by asking that question?
I'm asking if you're getting the signatures. I want an answer, or we're going to cut this conversation short. I mean, he's asking if you're planning on getting signatures.
well, it's a serious matter. I'm going to have to prepare a petition
That's right.
that will have my signature, which means that everything in it is as true as I know it to be.
Yeah.
And it will now say that I have been advised by, well, it wasn't just me. I mean, you made a public statement last Monday that you were pursuing the petition. And that's what I have to be concerned about, Ray, is whether I'm accurately, and whether that is accurate or not. Because if it's not accurate, I don't want to say it.
Well, in a pleading answer, that question can be answered. Isn't that true?
Well, Ray, my advice to the City Commission is based upon your public statement last Monday that you intend to go forward with this petition. My advice to them a few minutes ago was based upon my understanding. We said there's no need to try to stop anybody because there's no need for injunctive relief. We don't need to try to thwart that effort. We just need to get the question before the court as soon as possible because, frankly, there's work being done over there as we speak under a significant contract for that work. And that's the harm is not whether you continue to pursue signatures, but whether we unduly delay a determination of whether or not this action affects the city's financial commitment under that contract.
Mr. Mason, we can probably cut this short. You already have this information in your email that I said I would continue circulation.
You did.
Very good.
But you're telling me today that we didn't have standing.
Well, you have to
Now,
have
if it's-
actual injury before you have standing, don't you?
I'm sorry?
Don't you have to have actual injury before you can have standing?
I have to know, no, you're confusing the basis for a temporary restraining order and the need for showing just an actual controversy. The test for whether the court will consider and undertake an action for a declaratory judgment is whether there's an actual controversy, not whether there's irreparable harm. The irreparable harm test relates to whether a temporary restraining order is in order. We are not seeking a temporary restraining order. We're not attempting to affect the continued pursuit of signatures. We're just trying to get to the court as quickly as we can on the question of whether it's legislative or administrative on the basis that you've said you're going forward, which tells us you're going forward presumably on the basis of your belief that it is a legislative matter and that it's subject to initiative and referendum. We are saying it's not, and that's the point of controversy that presently exists as long as you are seeking signatures from citizens of the city of Salina.
And that is the question that's trying to be answered. To put it in front of a legal authority to answer that.
Right, and that's all we're trying to do.
I haven't changed that opinion, path. I've
Okay.
always been on that same path.
Right.
Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, could I ask that we limit Mr. Haruska's closing statements here to a minute and then move on with this
I
item,
have one
please?
question, though.
Sure.
Prior to that. No. I was just curious, is your issue with the commission then about spending money on the Bicentennial Center, or is it about the commission spending money, period?
It's one of the things that is an issue, that the public sees that it's out of control.
Which any of the spending is out of control?
Excessive spending, I would guess you'd have to
Like over a
categorize that.
certain dollar amount is out of control?
Well, that would, when it's $13 million, I'd say that's an excessive amount.
Mm-hmm.
What would you call an excessive amount?
I
How
don't
much money
consider
do you
any
have
amount
to spend on
excessive.
something frivolous?
I consider every amount important that we consider. And it
What was the last time you did something that was very small in number?
Mr.
that you
Mayor,
approved?
can I request that we move on with this? This is going nowhere.
Right.
Stop asking questions then.
Well, yeah, I agree. Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Ruska.
Thank you, Commissioners. Jason,
Certainly.
Jason.
Commissioners, I need to make a quick clarification. I never stated that the roof needed repaired. That's not the issue. The issue is about future capacity.
Right.
So just for the public's clarity, and there was a comment about jumping in front too fast before the issue occurs, but the fact of the matter is we can all pick up a constitution or state law or whatever it is, and we can read it, and we can come to our own conclusion as to what it means, and that's fine. We all do that. I do that as well. But when it comes to interpreting the legality of something, you have to go into the court cases. That's the information that the legal counsel shared, and you have to look at how the judges have looked at that. Judges have looked at these types of questions before. This is not new area. This is fairly clear. That's why we believe the outcome will be pretty clear, and we believe we know what the outcome is because it's not an area of the law that we feel is explorative or in any way at all. So anyway, as I mentioned before, what we're asking of you is to grant the direction to legal counsel that he's requested so that we can take the question upstairs, get the answer that we think we already know is sitting there waiting for us, so that we can end the waste of time and money that this is creating.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, anyway, if there's no further discussion, I entertain a motion then.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize legal counsel to prepare a petition to file in Saline County District Court naming Mr. Ray Haruska seeking declaratory judgment regarding a proposed initiative and referendum petition relating to resolution number 14-7152 as it amended section 2 of resolution number 13-6988.
Second.
Motion is second for the motion stated. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 4-0 today. It takes us on to other business. We do have another executive session, don't we? I might take just a minute real quick.
Yes.
I want to point out, I know obviously people have been watching the news lately, and there's some people who don't appreciate the people maybe as much who work for them as I think most of us up here do. And I want to point out that I think our city staff and all the city employees are doing a fantastic job to be up here 4 years now and to work with the level of excellence that I think we all can agree we experience every day that we're involved with you. I think is worth mentioning. I think it's pretty easy. I know before I was in government, I used to look and think, well, why does it take that long, or why should it be that way? Or maybe I even looked sometimes and said, why is it so expensive? But when you get in there and you actually know what you don't know, you realize how the process really works. And I think it's dangerous to be in a position where you may hold the fate of people who work for you and not know the job but think you know it. Gets really dangerous. And to put no value in those positions, I think, becomes harmful to the citizens. So I just want to point out that I think that there's no public discussion. There's nothing left in this meeting but me talking and probably us moving to an executive session, Mr. Haruska. So I think I just want to take the opportunity to say our thanks to you all. I think you're doing a fantastic job, and to keep the ball moving forward. I went ahead and announced today that I'll be running again for commissioner. So potentially you may have to put up with me for 4 more years, perhaps. I know Mr. Hardy has as well. But again, I think it's important that the people at home sometimes read a few news headlines and think, yeah, why are those guys getting paid that money or whatever else? Well, it's because you're experts at what you do. And there are often times when I look at some of the workloads that some of you do, and I think you're not getting paid near enough. I think we get paid a little. We don't have near the headaches that some of you all do on a day-to-day basis. So I definitely appreciate the work you do. I know I don't even need to hear from the other 3 because I know they do too. So appreciate it. And then at that,
I have
Mr. Mayor?
something too I'd like to say.
We have other business.
Well,
we do have other
we do
business.
Mayor,
have
just
other
wanted to tell you
business,
thank you very
yes.
much. And
well-
we know we're not perfect, but we try to serve you. We try to serve our community. And we have a lot of folks in the organization that work extremely hard to do that, and they're very dedicated to your goals and carrying those things out. So thank you for the compliment.
Well, no, and I mean, I know you do, and I'm just going to ramble on. I mean, if people, I mean, just the level of the things that is thought of that is never even, I mean, from everybody, from the when I was a lowly park employee raking leaves, you know, back 30 years ago or however many years ago that was, you know, from guys like that coming up with ideas to just the amount of involvement that they feel like they can be a part of the organization. I mean, it's just it's a great group. The people who come so prepared for our 2:30 or sometimes 2 or sometimes 3 study sessions, and the excellence that they do their job. It's pretty amazing. I mean, it really is. Like I said, it was easy when I was in the cheap seats to kind of walk by and just think, oh, well, these people, what kind of job is that? What do they do? They really need somebody to do that? It seems crazy. Then you realize, yeah, you really do, that there are people in our community who rely on those positions. So, but anyway, and I knew there was some other business, but is there any other
Well,
other business?
I just had a little bit of community business.
Sure, of
I
course.
wanted to thank the Ladies Auxiliary, VFW Auxiliary, for their lap robes once again for the veterans in nursing homes this past December for Christmas. You have no idea how long that takes to put together a quilt, and it really, they're quilts and they're beautiful. And also wanted to thank the Disabled American Veterans Auxiliary for the work that they've done.
Great.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about Oakdale Park. Historically, Oakdale Park's been the crown jewel of our park system in Salina, and I think in the next year and 2 years and 3 years, the park will become an even more prominent place for Salina as development happens around the park and as we continue improvements. And I have some concern about the park right now. I think that it really needs to be emphasized in terms of keeping it up, the maintenance, the seeding, the flowers, and to keep it as that jewel that we want it to be, I think. And when I went to a car show last, was it July or so? It was the KKOA car show, which was a fun event. But as I was watching, looking at the cars and walking around and talking to some folks, I also was watching the effect that the show was having on the park itself. And it was quite a bit different than the River Festival even, where you had the vendors that were on the grass instead of on the street, and so that was creating even more traffic and more damage to our grass. And the cars themselves, and there's probably no way to get around it, but they're all parked on the grass, of course. The other part that I was concerned about is that in that particular show, as opposed to the River Festival, the city shares no portion of the gate for that show. And this is a park that is totally cordoned off from the public, being a public area, for an entire weekend, and the city does not share at all in any of the revenue from that event. And to the extent that the city even provides electricity for free, where that isn't the case. In the River Festival, if you want electricity, you pay for it, and instead of it being donated. And there are other free things that happen from Visit Salina folks too, and I understand we have a show that's an economic driver for the city, and that's well and good. But we also have to keep in mind that the park may suffer because of that, and so I would like to maybe consider some sort of event policy, perhaps, that would ensure that Oakdale Park is maintained in the best way possible for years to come. I'd hate to see that. And I know that the Park and Recreation Department, when they're asked to cut back, they cut back on things like fertilizer and seed, and they may only do it every other year instead of every year. And that shouldn't be for that park. I think taking care of all of our parks is a high priority, but this park in particular, I think it's a travesty if we don't maintain it the way we should. In a very crass sense, when I was at the show and I saw the cars parked on the grass and everything, I thought, this looks like a vacant lot to me. This doesn't look like the crown jewel, and it was just a kind of a disconcerting feeling, and I'd like to see us have a park that we could be proud of year-round. And maybe, there's another thing. There was a German car show that shortly followed that one, which was not near as big. But the thing I was looking at then was, well, this was the ideal time to seed the park. But we couldn't because there were more cars in the park. And so I was thinking, well, maybe there ought to be a moratorium on events in the park during seeding season, so that at least we have an opportunity to bring the park back to a great shape by the following spring.
I think we do have some policies in place for park usage, I think, don't we, and for events?
I mean, we do with regards to reservations and things. We've been focusing on special events for a long time, and our main emphasis has been on the physical piece of what our role is and making sure the events are set up safely and so forth. And when we think about special events, that's obviously a very good example. We're also talking about parades and marathons and some of those that are a little more very complex from the physical perspective. And I think with KKOA, we've got the physical part down with all the pieces of it. One of the things that we did put some emphasis on a few years ago was a special events kind of a pricing approach. And at that point, the commissioners really kind of had a hard time with some pieces of it, and so we kind of didn't move forward with that. But if there's consensus of the commission to look at a couple of things I heard here, one is let's take a look at this park and talk about the season that we have to regenerate that turf and strengthen that turf and see if that affects our scheduling. We can certainly do that. Our parks people are good knowledge of turf maintenance. That's pretty easy. The other thing is if you believe that it would make sense to have to look at a fair and reasonable fee type, whether it be a cost recovery or facility use rental fee or whatever approach, we can look at multiple approaches, but a policy approach to that, and you're interested in us doing that, staff is certainly, we can certainly do that, and we've already done a lot of the pre-work for that, and so we'd be happy to do that. Bring it all back and have a study session discussion at some point here and talk about that more, and because we don't really have a good comprehensive approach to that piece.
It's probably worth looking at. I mean, I'll be the first to say that KKOA thing's a pretty big deal, and we're pretty happy to have them, and we'll want to tiptoe lightly around that because it's pretty easy for them to find another park in another community and take. How many people were in that? I mean, how many cars they said were in town that weekend? There wasn't a hotel room available, and so. Like I said, we sure appreciate that, but I think Commissioner Hardy's point is well taken, and that is we got to maintain our parks too, and if we're going to close them off for a few days, we at least need to, I think at least warrants revisiting. I was there the first time, obviously, we looked at this, and I think that was kind of our feelings, like, that's a lot of money, sure hate to, got to be kind of careful with that, but, so.
When the show was at Thomas Park, it kind of flew under the radar.
Yeah.
But I think more people are cognizant of what's going on at Oakdale Park.
It's big. It's a big deal.
And it's more visible.
Yeah, and it's a neat deal, but I mean, we want to do anything we can as far as, like you said, if there's some easy things we can do with Parks and Rec to look at seating. Obviously, we're not going to be able to tell them, hey, this is what weekend we need you here because we're going to take them when we can get them, but I think we need to, if there's anything we can help coordinate, or if there's some of the vendors can be moved to the street area like what we do on the festival, maybe there's some things we can do to make changes. I suppose it's worth looking at.
Yeah, I think probably the more difficult part, I think we can deal probably with the maintenance side. The more difficult part will be the fee, any kind of a fee structure. But if that's something that you as a whole are comfortable with us looking at, we can do that. Everybody okay with that? Okay.
Ray, I got to tell you, if you want a seat up here to talk whenever you want, they're taking filings for commissioner positions. This is not your free reign. I know you may go to the other commission meetings and stand up and talk whenever you want. You don't do it. No, Ray, we're done. You don't stand up and talk in our meetings. Ray, you had your public time. You had a point earlier which you could make. This is not for you to come up and talk whenever you want. We do have a soapbox, and I was put here by people who elected me. You, sir, were not. You've got your opportunity to fill out your paperwork and get up here, Ray. Until that time, don't disrupt our meetings. Don't get out of order. It's at our leisure. We let you talk at the beginning anyway. We don't have to hear from you. We choose to let it do. We think you'll respect the position that we put you in. But you choose not to respect what we allow you to do, Ray. So do you think we're going to want to let you come up here and talk every time you want to come up? No. You can act like the rest of the citizens and sit there, and when we ask for citizen comment, you can make your comments. You don't stand up there in the meetings like this and sit here and try and address us like you're a commissioner. You're not. That's right, Ray. I do get a little angry when somebody disrespects this group here and disrespects the citizens of this city by standing up here trying to take over our meeting.
I'm not trying to take
Ray, we're done.
I move to recess into executive session.
I have other business before.
Excuse me.
But I'll let you get there as quick as possible. And I have a few things, and I think that, mainly I think that the citizens of Salina, I think, feel under siege. And I think the events of last week clearly show that there is a lack of leadership in some of our governing bodies. And it's concerning. I think our group up here fully recognizes, by the mayor's comments earlier about the support of staff and employees and so forth, that we fully respect the form of government that we have, and we try to do the best that we can do to let that happen. And so I fully appreciate that. I understand that some people have concerns about spending and where we spend money and how much, and And that's fine and good, and I think that we all do. I mean, we've looked at certain things like how we're financing development, how we're financing and supporting economic development, and how we spend our money, and we're looking to try and do that in the most efficient way possible. I think if you really are concerned, you'd find out more about our continual improvement processes that we've set up through the city, where we're trying to find efficiencies in the operations that we do. Hopefully I got the name of that right.
Processes, yeah.
But, you know, I think there are ways that we can do two things. We can find efficiencies and save money, and we're looking every day to try and do that. And we rely on staff to be our partner in that. We don't feel like we need to get rid of them to make up that difference. And I just want to address one thing that was in the paper over the weekend, and that was the fact that certain people feel like they need to step across this desk and start making judgments for the city from the county commission seat. And that is regarding potential that somehow city of Salina needs to lay off employees. Well, I'll tell you what, I fully support our employees, and I think they do a great job. Every November we have an employee appreciation breakfast, and you know what? I think we all enjoy doing that, making pancakes and doing that. But the key thing is that we appreciate those employees. Another thing that was that I found remarkable is that if we're trying to find cost savings, and I know that some of the commissioners that are coming in and taking a seat in the county commission next week want to look at cutting salaries in their positions. And you know what? Quite frankly, I want to get gauge this board on it, but you know what? I think we have an opportunity here to provide leadership and show these guys how they can accomplish that. I'd like to see us cut our salaries by 12%. Just straight 12% cut in salary, and what that represents, it's symbolic. I mean, we make $300 a month. So making about $36 less a month, or $12 a week, really isn't that much. But what that 12% would represent is $2,200, and that's exactly how much we spend on the employee appreciation breakfast. And I think that it would be a good sign for us to show support of our employees, support of county commissioners, and solidarity with them to allow them to have a direction on the willingness to cut salaries that I'd like to, even if we get accused of it being symbolic, that we go ahead and cut our salaries 12% to show our appreciation to our employees.
Sounds good to me.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
thank you.
Evidently, that's a good idea.
Hopefully, that will let also some citizens know that, you know what, we really do care, and we're up here, and we're looking out for the dollars. And it's a very small amount, but, you know, we do a lot of work. I mean, I think some of us figure out that we probably make about $6 an hour.
Oh, it's not even $6. You're kidding me.
Yeah.
Like 6 cents an hour. I see.
Wow.
It's
Some of us work faster than others.
yeah. Yeah.
But the other thing is that I would also, so in addition to that, I would like to also, because next week on the 13th, the new county commissioners will take their seats, Commissioners Shadwick, Larson, and Smith. And I just want to let them know publicly that we want to reach out and work with them. We really do. 85% of the citizens of Salina
Saline County.
is the overlap.
Yeah.
Is the overlap. 85% is the overlap. And we really need to get things together, and we need to reach out to them to know that we want to work with them, and also the two sitting commissioners, Guile and Price, need to know that we also are looking at the 13th as a chance to turn over a new leaf. And so the other thing I'd like to do is that I'd like to propose that we do a proclamation next Monday at our meeting, that we would declare next week or next Tuesday or Monday or whatever Good Government Day, and work on putting together a proclamation that just states our desire and encouragement for good and responsible government. So if staff can if we can agree with that, staff can put together some of those things, I'd be interested in hearing any other comments.
No, I think it's great. I think Davis is sitting home right now going, I signed up for what? $12 less a week? Are you kidding me? Yeah.
Yeah. Commissioners, just to be clear, is there full consensus you'd like to do that?
That's-
both of those
yeah,
items?
yeah.
Okay. One thing I'd like to say, given the opportunity here, is that, and I won't get into a lot of the things that went on with the county, we could be here all night, but what I would like to say is that, out of the negative attention that's been brought because of the actions of the couple of the county commissioners, we forget, quite honestly, that the county employees, just like the city employees you're talking about, are from the county. They're people of the county for the most part. And we all know that a community is not made up of just people who were born here. A lot of people come in later in life, and then they like Salina, they make friends, so forth, and they become a part of the community. That's the way life is everywhere you go. And they are fine people. They're very, very good people. And they work hard, just like our employees. We get along great with them. We're able to plan and do things together with them, I guess to the detriment of some of the county commissioners. But it's all with the intent of not saying be like a city. We know a county government is different, and it can be more similar. It doesn't have to be. That's up to the policymakers. But the point is to, whenever we can, partner and utilize the resources that come from the same taxpayers in the most efficient and effective way possible. And our city and county staff people have always done an excellent job trying to do that. They're good people with the best of intentions. And quite honestly, it's an atrocity how certain those three county employees were treated, not necessarily from the policy perspective of, does an organization need to cut back and where? Those are conversations that sometimes have to happen. And I'm not saying that they happen correctly. What I'm saying is sometimes organizations have to go there. But what happened is there was no warning to those employees. Possible violations of policy, we don't know that. We'll find that out. All done on a reckless whim, and quite honestly, those employees weren't looked in the eye and told what could happen or what will happen, and they weren't properly notified, and they were really, quite honestly, treated with full disrespect. And what that does is it sets a very scary tone for the rest of the employees.
Right.
And there's no reason for that. And so we're, from our perspective as city employees, we're fully supportive of the county employees. We know who they are and what they do and how well they do it. And so without question, we obviously fully support what you like to do, and we're very happy to put together that proclamation for you.
Great.
It's important for the county employees to know they are very much supported by the city and by everyone.
When I got a telephone call today from the city, I was accepted into the recycling program.
All
right.
Look at that.
Finally.
I guess we could recycle him. Yeah. Okay.
Are we ready now?
It really just feels like a real yin-yang today. Lots of yelling, lots of tears, lots of, I just feel
You sure you're ready?
ready. I was ready 20 minutes ago. I wasn't ready to give up $12 a week.
I move to recess into executive session for 30 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at 6:05. I'd give us a little
Yeah,
time.
a little break.
Second.
Motion and second to move into executive session until 6:05. Do we anticipate any business afterwards?
No, we do not.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries 4-0.
Times as much to make.
A judge has ordered self-taught survivalist Eric Freen to stand trial on charges he killed a Pennsylvania